There is a single word that holds more power to generate guilt in a nice person than any other. That word is no. For many of us, saying no feels like a declaration of war. It feels like we are being selfish, difficult, or unkind. The moment the word leaves our lips, an immediate, overwhelming wave of guilt washes over us. A voice screams inside, "You are disappointing them. You are a bad person." This guilt is the loyal and utterly exhausting guardian at the gate of your authenticity. It is the primary reason so many of us choose to abandon ourselves rather than face the discomfort of protecting our own energy. We choose a slow internal death over a moment of potential external conflict. I have wrestled with this guilt for much of my life. It felt like a fundamental truth, an inseparable part of being a good and caring human being. But what if this guilt isn't a moral compass? What if, as the work of psychiatrist Carl Jung suggests, it is simply a symptom of a poorly defined inner world? What if setting a boundary is not an act of aggression against others, but the most profound act of respect for oneself? Today, we are going to look at boundaries through a completely different lens. We will move beyond the simple scripts of how to say no. We will dive into the Jungian understanding of boundaries as the sacred act of defining the self. We will learn why guilt arises and how to meet it not with resistance, but with wisdom. This is how you learn to build a treasury for your own well-being, one that protects your energy without building walls around your heart.
To heal the guilt, we must first understand its origin. And its origin is not in your morality, but in your psychology. The guilt you feel when setting a boundary is not evidence that you are a bad person. It is evidence of a psychological enmeshment. It's a sign that the boundaries between your own emotional space and the emotional space of others have become blurred, porous, or in some cases, non-existent. You have learned to feel responsible not only for your own feelings, but for the feelings of everyone around you. When you say no, you anticipate their disappointment, their anger, or their sadness. And because the boundary is blurred, their anticipated disappointment feels like your failure. Their potential sadness feels like your fault. This is the very engine of people-pleasing. Carl Jung's entire body of work points towards a central goal: individuation. This is the lifelong process of becoming a psychologically whole and distinct individual, separate from the collective unconscious and the expectations of others. And you cannot become a distinct individual without distinct boundaries. A boundary, in the Jungian sense, is not a wall you build to push people away. It is the sacred circle you draw around yourself that defines where you end and another person begins. It is the skin of the soul. Without this skin, you are constantly vulnerable to psychic infection, absorbing the moods, demands, and anxieties of others as if they were your own. I remember working with a 38-year-old nurse named Chloe, a character so many of you resonate with. She was drowning in guilt. Her colleagues would constantly ask her to swap shifts, and she would always agree, even when she was exhausted. Her family had come to expect her to host every holiday dinner. When she first contemplated saying no to an extra shift, she was consumed by guilt. She told me, "But my coworker will be so disappointed. She's a single mom. I would be a terrible person to say no." Notice her language. She was not just considering her coworker's feelings. She was feeling them as her own responsibility. The boundary was completely blurred. Our work was not to practice saying the word no. It was to begin the subtle, internal work of drawing that sacred circle. I asked her, "Whose job is it to manage your coworker's disappointment?" This was a revolutionary question for her. She had always assumed it was her job. The idea that her coworker was a capable adult who could manage her own feelings was entirely new. The guilt began to lessen when she realized a boundary was not an attack, but a clarification of responsibility. It was an act of respecting both herself and her coworker as separate, sovereign individuals. This feeling of being overly responsible for others' emotions is almost always learned in childhood. Perhaps you had a parent who was emotionally volatile and you learned that your job was to manage their moods to stay safe. You became a hyper-vigilant emotional caretaker. Or perhaps you were praised for being the easy child, the one who never had needs, the one who always went along with the plan. You learned that your value and your safety came from having no boundaries at all. This old programming runs deep. So when you as an adult try to draw a boundary, your nervous system sounds a 5-alarm fire. It screams, "Danger! You are breaking the rules. You will be abandoned. You will not be loved." The guilt you feel is not a present-day reality check. It is a ghost. It is a somatic memory of a past survival strategy that is no longer serving you. It is in essence the cry of a frightened inner child who believes that your survival depends on keeping everyone else happy. To heal this, as Jung would advocate, we must make this unconscious process conscious. We must learn to separate the past from the present. When that wave of guilt arises, you can pause. You can go to your inner sanctuary, and you can say to that feeling, "I see you. I know you are trying to protect me. I know you are scared. Thank you for your service. But I am an adult now. I am safe. I can handle their disappointment. It is not my job to manage their feelings." This is not a one-time fix. It is a practice of self-reparenting. You are gently, consistently reassuring the frightened parts of you that the old rules no longer apply. You are teaching your own nervous system that setting a boundary does not lead to abandonment, but to self-respect. You are not building a wall. You are simply defining your own sacred ground. You are claiming the space that is rightfully yours, the space you need to protect the gold you have worked so hard to find.
Now that we understand the guilt is a ghost from the past, not a present-day truth, we can begin the practical work of drawing our sacred circle. It is helpful to know that boundaries are not just one thing. There are different types, and understanding them can help you identify exactly where your energy is leaking the most. There are physical boundaries concerning your personal space and your body. There are time boundaries concerning how you spend your precious hours. There are emotional boundaries, which we've discussed, concerning your responsibility for the feelings of others. And there are energetic boundaries, concerning whose energy you allow into your inner world. For today, let's focus on the most common battleground for the people-pleaser, time and emotional boundaries. The act of setting a boundary is a skill, and like any skill, it improves with practice. You wouldn't start learning to play the piano with a complex sonata. You would start with simple scales. Similarly, we do not start by setting a huge confrontational boundary with the most difficult person in our life. We start small. We start in low-stakes situations to build our confidence and regulate our nervous system. I want to offer you a 3-step ritual for setting a boundary, a practice you can use anytime that wave of guilt threatens to overwhelm you. The 3 steps are pause, clarify, and communicate. Step 1, pause. This is the most crucial step. When a request is made of you, especially one that triggers that familiar feeling of obligation or dread, your automatic, conditioned response is to say yes immediately to relieve the discomfort. You must interrupt this pattern. The pause is your moment of power.
It can be as simple as saying, "Let me check my calendar and get back to you." Or, "That's an interesting idea. Let me think about it." I used to feel immense pressure to give an answer on the spot. Giving myself permission to pause was a game changer. It created a space between the request and my response. In that space, I could actually check in with myself, which was a completely new experience. This pause is your first boundary. You are claiming your right to not be immediately available. Step 2. Clarify. In the space created by your pause, you do the inner work. You go to your inner sanctuary. You check in with your body. How does this request feel? Does it feel expansive and exciting, or does it feel constricting and heavy? Your body holds so much wisdom. A yes that feels like a lead weight in your stomach is not an authentic yes. Then clarify your why. Why do you want to say no? It is not enough to just say no. You must know why for yourself. Your why is your anchor. For my client Chloe, the nurse, her why for not taking the extra shift was, "Because my well-being is a priority, and I need this time to recharge so I can be present for my family and my other patients." Notice her why was not selfish. It was an act of responsible self-stewardship. Your why could be because I need creative time to nurture my soul, or because my energy is finite and I'm choosing to save it for my own priorities. Knowing your why gives your no a solid foundation of self-respect. Step 3. Communicate. This is the external action. The key here is to communicate your boundary in a way that is clear, kind, and firm, without over-explaining, apologizing, or justifying. This was the hardest part for me. I used to write long, rambling emails explaining every single reason why I couldn't do something, hoping the other person would understand and not be mad. But over-explaining is a symptom of guilt. It is an attempt to manage the other person's feelings, which, as we've learned, is not our job. A clean boundary statement is short and respectful. It can be as simple as, "Thank you so much for the invitation, but I won't be able to make it." Or, "I appreciate you thinking of me for this project, but I don't have the capacity to take on anything new right now." Or, "I can't help you with that, but I wish you the best of luck." Notice what is not in these statements. There is no long list of excuses. There are no frantic apologies. You do not owe anyone a detailed explanation for your no. Your no is a complete sentence. It is a sovereign statement of your reality. This will feel uncomfortable at first. Your inner child will panic. The guilt will surge. When it does, you return to your why. You remind yourself that you are not being a bad person. You are being an authentic person. You are honoring the skin of your soul. This practice, this ritual of pause, clarify, and communicate is a core discipline in the journey of individuation that Carl Jung described. It is the conscious act of choosing your own center over the demands of the collective. Each time you do it, you are strengthening your psychological core. You are telling yourself and the world that you matter. As you begin to practice this new skill, you will inevitably encounter the next great fear: other people's reactions. This is often the reason we avoid setting boundaries in the first place. We are terrified of being perceived as difficult, selfish, or unkind. We fear conflict. We fear losing the relationship. And it is true. When you change the rules of a relationship, the other person will likely have a reaction. They are used to you being a certain way. Your newfound boundaries can feel like a disruption to a system that, for them, was working perfectly fine. They might get angry. They might try to guilt trip you. "I thought I could count on you." They might become passive-aggressive. They might even accuse you of changing or not being the person they thought you were. And in a way, they are right. You are changing. You are becoming more yourself. I remember the first time I set a significant boundary with a close family member. I was met with tears and accusations of being selfish and uncaring. It was excruciating. Every cell in my body wanted to retract the boundary, to apologize, to smooth things over and return to the familiar, albeit suffocating, peace. My inner child was screaming that I was about to be abandoned. In that moment, I had to anchor myself in the why I had clarified earlier. My why was, I am doing this not to hurt you, but to save myself. I cannot have an authentic relationship with you if I am constantly betraying myself to please you. This brings us to a profound, paradoxical truth from a Jungian perspective. A healthy boundary is ultimately an act of love, not just for yourself, but for the other person and for the relationship itself. Let that sink in. A boundary is an act of love. Why? Because relationships built on self-abandonment are not real. They are a performance. When you are constantly suppressing your own needs, feelings, and truths to keep someone else happy, you are not showing up as your authentic self. You are showing up as your persona, your mask. The other person is not in a relationship with you. They are in a relationship with your representative, your carefully constructed diplomat. And while this might feel peaceful on the surface, it is built on a foundation of resentment and inauthenticity. It is a house of cards, destined to collapse. Setting a boundary is an invitation to a more authentic relationship. It is a courageous declaration that says, I want to be in a real relationship with you, one where I can show up as my whole self, and I trust that you are strong enough to handle it. I respect you enough to believe you want to be in a relationship with the real me, not just my accommodating mask. This is a radical shift. We are taught that boundaries create distance, but in reality, porous, non-existent boundaries are what truly create distance because they breed resentment, and resentment is the silent killer of intimacy. A clear, respectful boundary actually creates the potential for a deeper, more honest connection. Of course, not everyone will accept this invitation. Some people benefit from your lack of boundaries. They may push back, and in some cases, the relationship may change or even end. This is a painful but necessary part of the process of individuation. As you become more yourself, you will naturally attract people who resonate with your authentic self. And you may find that some old relationships, those built on your self-betrayal, can no longer be sustained. This can bring grief, but it also brings an incredible sense of liberation. You are clearing space for relationships that are based on mutual respect, not one-sided sacrifice. This is the deeper meaning of what Carl Jung taught. The journey to wholeness requires us to differentiate ourselves from the collective. It requires us to define who we are, separate from the roles we play and the expectations placed upon us. Your boundaries are the lines you draw in the sand that say, "This is me. This is where my sacred ground begins." The guilt you feel is the friction of this separation, the growing pains of a soul learning to stand on its own 2 feet. So when you feel that guilt, see it for what it is. It is not a moral verdict. It is an echo of an old fear. Meet it with compassion. Reassure the frightened part of you. Anchor yourself in your why. And remember that every time you set a clear, kind boundary, you are not pushing someone away. You are lovingly inviting them to meet the real you. And you are finally, courageously, making space for yourself in your own life. You deserve that space. It is your birthright.
Today, we have looked at boundaries not as walls of separation, but as the sacred act of defining the self. We have journeyed deep into the wisdom of Carl Jung to understand that the guilt we feel is not a reflection of our character, but an echo of an old survival program. It is the ghost of a past fear, not a present-day truth. We now see that a boundary is not an act of selfishness, but a profound act of love, for ourselves, and for the potential of a more authentic relationship with others. We have a simple 3-step ritual: pause, clarify, and communicate, to practice this new skill with gentleness and intention. We understand that while some may resist our newfound boundaries, this is a necessary part of claiming our own lives and clearing space for connections based on mutual respect. The most powerful thing you can take away from our conversation is this: you have a right to your own sacred space. You have a right to your own energy. You have a right to say no. This is not a privilege to be earned. It is your birthright as a sovereign individual. I know this journey is not easy. I know the guilt can feel all-consuming. But I promise you, on the other side of that discomfort is a sense of freedom, integrity, and self-respect that is more nourishing than any external approval could ever be. You are not just learning to say no, you are learning to say a deep, resounding yes to your own soul. Your invitation this week is to find one very small, low-stakes opportunity to practice. Use the 3-step ritual. Pause when a request is made, clarify your why for yourself, and communicate your boundary with a simple, kind, and firm statement. It could be with a telemarketer. It could be with a friend asking for a small favor when you are drained. Start small. Build the muscle. Celebrate your courage. But as you begin to get better at saying no to what you don't want, a new and perhaps even more perplexing question will begin to surface. Once you have cleared the space, once you have protected your energy, what do you actually want to fill that space with? For many of us who have spent a lifetime pleasing others, this can be the most terrifying question of all. We have become so disconnected from our own inner compass that when we finally have the freedom to choose, we find we have no idea what we want. We have said no to the world only to face a hollow, "I don't know," from within. And that hollow feeling, that blank map of your own desires, is the next great frontier of our inner work. Why does this happen? How has people-pleasing erased our true selves? And how do we begin the delicate process of rediscovering our own wants, needs, and passions? That is the profound mystery we will begin to unravel together in our next conversation. We have learned to build the treasury. Now, we must learn what treasure to put inside. In the comments below, I invite you to share one very small, low-stakes opportunity to practice. Use the 3-step ritual. Pause when a request is made, clarify your why for yourself, and communicate your boundary with a simple, kind, and firm statement. It could be with a telemarketer. It could be with a friend asking for a small favor when you are drained. Start small. Build the muscle. Celebrate your courage. But as you begin to get better at saying no to what you don't want, a new and perhaps even more perplexing question will begin to surface. Once you have cleared the space, once you have protected your energy, what do you actually want to fill that space with? For many of us who have spent a lifetime pleasing others, this can be the most terrifying question of all. We have become so disconnected from our own inner compass that when we finally have the freedom to choose, we find we have no idea what we want. We have said no to the world only to face a hollow, "I don't know," from within.